Chapter 1. The Rascals and the Elfbergs. I wonder when you're going to do something useful, Rudolph, my brother's wife said. She looked at me crossly over the breakfast table. But why should I do anything, Rose? I answered, calmly eating my egg. I've got nearly enough money for the things I want, and my brother, Robert, is a lord, Lord Burlesdon. I'm very happy. You're 29, and you've done nothing except play about? It's true. We Rascals are a rich and famous family, and we don't need to do anything. This made Rose angry. Rich and famous families usually behave worse than less important families, she said. When I heard this, I touched my dark red hair. I knew what she meant. I'm so pleased that Robert's hair is black, she cried. Just then, my brother, Robert, came in. When he looked at Rose, he could see that there was something wrong. What's the matter, my dear? He said. Oh, she's angry because I never do anything useful, and because I've got red hair, I said. Well, I know he can't do much about his hair, or his nose, Rose began. No, the nose and the hair are in the family, my brother agreed, and Rudolph has both of them. In the room, there were many family pictures, and one of them was of a very beautiful woman, Lady Amelia, who lived 150 years ago. I stood up and turned to look at it. If you took that picture away, Robert, Rose cried, we could forget all about it. Oh, but I don't want to forget about it, I replied. I like being an Elfberg. But perhaps I should stop for a moment and explain why Rose was angry about my nose and my hair, and why I, a Rascendil, said I was an Elfberg. After all, the Elfbergs are the royal family of Ruritania, and have been for hundreds of years. The story is told in a book about the Rascendil family history. In the year 1733, Prince Rudolph of Ruritania came to England on a visit, and he stayed for several months. Like many of the Elfberg royal family, he had blue eyes, an unusually long, straight nose, and a lot of dark red hair. He was also tall and very good-looking. During his stay here, he became friendly with Lady Amelia, the beautiful wife of Lord Burlesdon. They became very good friends indeed, which naturally did not please Lord Burlesdon. So, one cold, wet morning, the two men fought. The prince was hurt in the fight, but got better and was hurried back to Ruritania. There he married and became King Rudolph III. But Lord Burlesdon fell ill, and 6 months later he died. 2 months after that, Lady Amelia had a baby son, who became the next Lord Burlesdon, and the head of the Rascals family. The boy grew into a man with blue eyes, a long straight nose, and dark red hair. These things can happen in the best of families. And among the many pictures of the Rascals at home, you can see that 5 or 6 of them have the same blue eyes, the same nose, and the same red hair. So, because my hair was red and I had the Elfberg nose, Rose worried about me. In the end, to please her, I promised to get a job in 6 months' time. This gave me 6 free months to enjoy myself first. And an idea came to me. I would visit Ruritania. None of my family had ever been there. They preferred to forget all about the Lady Amelia. But I saw in the newspaper that in 3 weeks, the new young king, Rudolph V, would have his coronation. It would be an interesting time to visit the country. I knew my family would not like my going, so I told them I was going walking in Austria. Chapter 2. The Colour of Men's Hair. On the way to Ruritania, I decided to spend a night in Paris with a friend. The next morning, he came with me to the station, and as we waited for the train, we watched the crowds. We noticed a tall, dark, very fashionable lady, and my friend told me who she was. That's Madame Antoinette de Mauban. She's travelling on the same train as you, but don't fall in love with her. Why not? I asked, amused. Ah, said my friend. All Paris knows that she's in love with Duke Michael of Strelsau. And he, as you know, is the half-brother of the new king of Ruritania. Although he's only the second son and will never be king himself, he's still an important man and very popular, I hear, with many Ruritanians. The lovely Madame Antoinette won't look twice at you, Rudolph. I laughed, but he had woken my interest in the lady. I did not speak to her during the journey, and when we arrived in Ruritania, I left the train at Zenda, a small town outside the capital. But I noticed that Madame de Mauban went on to Strelsau, the capital. I was welcomed very kindly at my hotel. It belonged to a fat old lady and her pretty daughter. From them, I learned that the coronation was to be on the day after next, and not in 3 weeks. The old lady was more interested in Duke Michael of Strelsau than in the new king. The castle of Zenda and all the land around it belonged to the duke. But the old lady said, "It's not enough. Duke Michael should be king. He spends all his time with us. Every Ruritanian knows him, but we never see the new king." But the daughter cried, "Oh no! I hate Black Michael. I want a red Elfberg. And the king, our friend Johann says, is very red. Johann works for the Duke, and he's seen the king. In fact, the king's staying just outside Zender now, she added. He's resting at the Duke's house in the forest before going on to Stralsau on Wednesday for his coronation. The Duke's already in Stralsau getting everything ready. They're friends? I asked. Friends who want the same place and the same wife, the pretty girl replied. The Duke wants to marry his cousin, Princess Flavia, but people say she's going to be King Rudolph's wife and the Queen. Just then, their friend Johann entered the room. We have a visitor, Johann, the girl's mother said, and Johann turned towards me. But when he saw me, he stepped back with a look of wonder on his face. What's the matter, Johann? The daughter asked. Good evening, sir, Johann said, still staring at me. He did not seem to like what he saw. The girl began to laugh. It's the color of your hair, sir, she explained. We don't often see that color here. It's the Elfberg red, not Johann's favorite color. The next day, I decided to walk through the forest for a few miles and take the train to Stralsau from a little station along the road. I sent my luggage on by train, and after lunch, I started out on foot. First, I wanted to see the castle of Zender, and in half an hour, I had climbed the hill to it. There were two buildings, the old one, with a moat around it, and the new modern building. Duke Michael could have friends to stay with him in the new castle, but he could go into the old castle when he wanted to be alone. The water in the moat was deep, and if he pulled up the drawbridge over the moat, no one could get to him. I stayed there for some time and looked at the castle. And then I walked on through the forest for about an hour. It was beautiful, and I sat down to enjoy it. Before I knew what had happened, I was asleep. Suddenly, I heard a voice say, "Good heavens, he looks just like the king." When I opened my eyes, there were two men in front of me. One of them came nearer. "May I ask your name?" he said. "Well, why don't you tell me your names first?" I replied. The younger of the two men said, "This is Captain Sapt, and I am Fritz von Tarlenheim. We work for the King of Ruritania." "And I am Rudolf Rassendyll," I answered, "a traveller from England. My brother is Lord Burlesdon." "Of course! The hair!" Sapt cried. "You know the story, Fritz." Just then, a voice called out from the trees behind us. "Fritz? Fritz! Where are you, man?" "It's the king," Fritz said, and Sapt laughed. Then a young man jumped out from behind a tree. I gave a cry, and when he saw me, he stepped back in sudden surprise. The King of Ruritania looked just like Rudolf Rassendyll, and Rudolf Rassendyll looked just like the king. For a moment, the king said nothing, but then he asked, Captain? Fritz? Who is this? Sapt went to the king and spoke quietly in his ear. The king's surprise changed slowly to an amused smile. Then suddenly he began to laugh loudly. "Well met, cousin," he cried. "Where are you travelling to?" "To Strelsau, sir. To the coronation." The king looked at his friends, and for a moment he was serious. But then he began to laugh again. "Wait until Brother Michael sees that there are two of us," he cried. "Perhaps it isn't a very good idea for Mr. Rascals to go to Strelsau," Fritz said, worried, and Sapt agreed with him. "Oh, we'll think about the coronation tomorrow," the king said. "Tonight, we'll enjoy ourselves. Come, cousin." We returned to the Duke's house in the forest, where we had an excellent dinner. The king called loudly for wine, and Captain Sapt and Fritz seemed worried. Clearly, the king liked his wine a little too much. "Remember, the coronation is tomorrow," warned old Sapt. But the king was only interested in enjoying himself tonight. So we all drank and talked and drank again. At last, the king put down his glass and said, "I've drunk enough." As he said that, old Joseph, the king's servant, came in. He put some very special old wine on the table in front of the king and said, "Duke Michael offers you this wine and asks you to drink it for love of him." "Well done, Black Michael," the king cried. "Well, I'm not afraid to drink your wine." And he drank every drop of wine in the bottle himself. Then his head fell forward onto the table, and soon afterwards, I too remembered no more of that wild evening. Chapter 3. The king goes to his coronation. I do not know how long I was asleep, but when I woke up, I was cold and wet. Sapt and Fritz stood there looking at me. "We had to wake you," Sapt said. "Cold water was the only way." Fritz took my arm and turned me round. "Look," he said. The king was on the floor, and when Sapt pushed him with his foot, he did not move. "We've been trying to wake him for half an hour," said Fritz. "But he's sleeping like a dead man." The three of us looked at each other. "Was there something in that last bottle of wine?" I asked. "I don't know," Sapt said. "But if he doesn't get to his coronation today, there'll never be a coronation for him. All Ruritania is waiting for him in Strelsau, and Black Michael with half the army too. We can't tell them that the king is too drunk to go to his own coronation." "You can say he's ill," I said. "Ill?" Sapt laughed angrily. "Everybody will know what that means. He's been ill too many times before, Tell me, do you think somebody put something in his wine? I asked. It was Black Michael, Fritz replied. We all know he wants to be king himself. For a moment or two, we were all silent. And then Sapt looked at me. You must go to Strelsau and take his place. I stared at him. You're crazy, man. How can I do that? The king... It's dangerous, I know, said Sapt. But it's our only chance. If you don't go, Black Michael will be king, and the real king will be dead or a prisoner. How could I refuse? It took me 2 minutes to decide. I'll go, I said. Well done, boy, cried Sapt. He went on quickly and quietly. After the coronation, they'll take us to the palace for the night. When we're alone, you and I will leave and ride back here to fetch the king. He'll be all right by then. I'll take him back to Strelsau, and you must get out of the country as fast as you can. But what about the soldiers? Fritz asked. They're Duke Michael's men, and they're coming to take the king back to Strelsau for the coronation. We'll go before the soldiers get here, Sapt said, and we'll hide the king. He picked up the king in his arms, and we opened the door. An old woman, Johann's mother, was standing there. She turned without a word and went back to the kitchen. Did she hear? Fritz asked. Don't worry. I'll make sure she can't talk, Sapt said, and he carried the king away. When he returned, he told us that he had locked the old woman in a room underground. The king and Joseph were hidden in another room underground. Joseph will take care of the king and tell him everything when he wakes up. Come, he went on. There's no time to lose. It's already 6 o'clock. Soon, I was dressed in the king's clothes. The horses were ready, and we were on our way. As we rode through the forest, Sapt told me everything that he could about my life, my family, my friends, and the things I liked or did not like. He told me what to do when we got there and how to speak to different people. He was a wonderful teacher, and I listened hard. One mistake could mean death for all 3 of us. It was 8 o'clock when we arrived at the station and got on the train. And by 9:30, we were in Strelsau. And when King Rudolph V stepped out of the train, the people shouted, "God save the king!" Old Sapt smiled. "God save them both," he said quietly. "I only hope we are all alive tonight."